Hello everyone. Tomorrow we will be taking the Unit 6 exam, which means that today we are doing our Unit 6 review. It is all about doing operations with polynomials. So starting with number 1, it says a candle company is closing one of its two stores and combining the inventory from both stores. The polynomials represent the inventory of each store. So I have store A and store B. Write an expression that represents the combined inventory of both stores. So notice how they keep saying combined up here. So if you're combining inventory, what you would do is you would add. So they're asking us here to add these two polynomials. So we're going to add things that are like terms, which means they have to have the same letter, same exponent. So if I'm looking at this one here, 1/4 x to the second power, 3x to the second power. See how they both have second power? So we're going to add those together. 3 plus 1/4 would be 3 1/4, but we're going to write that as an improper fraction, meaning that the top is bigger than the bottom. So that would come out to 13/4 x to the second power. So nothing happens to the exponent here. All you're doing is adding the coefficients. Then I want anything that has an x. So it would be right here, plus 3/5x. But the other polynomial doesn't have anything with an x, so that number is going to stay the same. Nothing happens to it. Plus 3/5x. And then last, we're going to add anything that doesn't have a power. So in other words, our constants. The first one has positive 3/4. The second one has negative 1/2. So you're adding these numbers, 3/4 plus negative 1/2. With fractions, you need to have a common denominator, but in our case, we have calculators, so you could just type it into the calculator here, which would give you positive 1/4. So that is our answer. So if it ever says combined or total, what they want you to do is add. Okay, let's look at problem number 2. Write an expression equivalent to the following polynomial by using distribution. So distribution means that negative 3n on the outside needs to get multiplied into each thing that's on the inside. So let's start with the first thing. What is negative 3n times 6n? Start with the coefficients. Negative 3 times 6 is negative 18. But then you need to do the variables, the letters. If I have n times n, you just have to count how many you have total. So if I have 1 on the outside, 1 on the inside, it is a total of 2n, so n to the second power. Now we're going to multiply that negative 3n times negative 5. Negative times a negative would make a positive number, so it's going to be a plus sign. Negative 3 times 5 is 15. But since the outside has an n, we still need an n in our answer. Okay, number 3. Write an expression equivalent to the following polynomial by simplifying. So these look kind of scary because there's a lot of parentheses and a lot of terms. But honestly, we're just going to go step by step, and this should be pretty simple. So according to Pemdas, order of operations, the first thing you need to do is anything that's inside parentheses. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take off any parentheses that I see. So 11 doesn't have parentheses. But here I have a positive sign. There's an invisible 1 here that we're going to multiply to everything that's inside the parentheses. But because it's 1, it's very simple because 1 times anything just stays the same. So I'm going to have plus 3m to the second power plus 3 plus 2m. Okay, and then as I move along this polynomial, I have minus 3m then that negative sign on the outside of those parentheses, again, there's an invisible 1 here, so we're going to multiply. Negative 1 times 4 is negative 4, and negative 1 times 5m squared is negative 5m squared. So basically, they just turn negative. So now, that long expression, I don't have any parentheses anymore, which is good. So now we're going to combine like terms. So again, we're going to look at those exponents. Let's start biggest exponent. So I have positive 3m to the second power and negative 5m to the second power. So we're going to combine by adding. Positive 3 minus 5 would give me negative 2, and then I just keep the same variable and exponent. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. I have positive 2m, positive, so I'm going to highlight that, plus, minus 3m. So again, we're going to combine these. Positive 2m plus negative 3 gives us negative 1m. Only when you take the test, there's not going to be a 1 there. So actually, let's just write this as negative m. And lastly, you're going to do the ones that are constant, so the ones that don't have any letters. So I have 11 plus 3 minus 4. And you can put that all into the calculator all at once, and that would give you 10. But since it's positive 10, we're going to have plus sign. So that would be our answer. Okay, the next problem is the same thing. I just wanted to practice it again because it is important and it does show up a few times on the test. So write an expression equivalent to the following polynomial by simplifying. So we're going to use distribution. Anytime we have parentheses, that way we can get down to no parentheses at all. So this 7y, it's not in parentheses, so it's going to stay the same. But the next term, negative 3, it's right next to parentheses, so that needs to get multiplied in. Negative 3 times y is negative 3y. Negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. And then now that plus 4y squared, since it's not in the parentheses, it'll stay the same. So now that there's no more parentheses, we're going to combine stuff that has the same exponent. So I have a positive 7y to the second power and a positive 4y to the second power. 7 plus 4 gives us 11. Okay, then the next thing, I want anything that just has a y. So this is negative 3y. But that's it. That's the only one, so nothing's going to change about that. It's going to stay negative 3y. And then last, that's the only constant, the only normal number that doesn't have any letters next to it, so that's going to stay the same. So this would be our answer. Okay, let's move on to the next one. It says, write an expression equivalent to the following polynomial by dividing by the greatest common factor. So I need to look at this polynomial and say, what is the biggest number that will divide both 16 and 24? So you can go through and get all the factors of each number, but in your calculator, there's a little bit of a shortcut here. You can press menu 2, 5, and they call it GCD for greatest common divisor. And you would type in negative 16, comma, negative 24, and it should give you what their greatest common divisor is, which in this case is 8. So we're going to divide by 8. But not only that, we need to look at the letters themselves. Both of them have an x, so we could also divide by the x. The other thing that's special is that they're both negative, so we can divide by negative. So the way we write our answer is you have to state what you're dividing by, so we're going to divide by negative 8x. And then now let's actually say what the answer is. Negative 16 divided by negative 8 is positive 2. And x squared divided by x is x. And then for the second term, negative 24 divided by negative 8 is positive 3. So now you'll have a plus sign. And x divided by x would just go away. So this would be our answer. With these as well, because your test is multiple choice, if you're unable to see the greatest common divisor, you could just go through each one of the answer choices and multiply this back in and make sure that you get back to the original problem. Okay, now let's turn to the back of the review. It says, write a polynomial to represent the area of the given rectangle. So with this one, you have to remember that the formula for area of a rectangle is length times width. So in our picture, they give us those two things. Length is across the top, width is the one that's going up and down. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply these two binomials that they gave us. So this problem really turns into 2m plus 7 times 6m minus 5. So I taught you guys to use double distribution. I also taught some people the shortcut of using the box method. And what seemed to be easier for everybody was box method. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on here. So when I say box method, I mean we're going to draw our box. And that first binomial, we're going to write it down the side. So 2m plus 7. And then the second binomial, 6m minus 5, is going to go across the top. Now we're going to multiply corresponding boxes. So for instance, on this first box, I have 2m times 6m. 2 times 6 is 12, and m times m gives me m to the second power. Okay, this next box, I have 2m times negative 5. So that would give me negative 10m. Now at the bottom, I have 6m times 7. 6 times 7 is 42 with an m. And then last, I have 7 times negative 5, which is negative 35. So when you're inside the box, you multiply. But now when we write our answer and we're taking stuff out of the box, we combine like terms by adding. So at the top left, that is the only box that has m to the second power. So that means that that one is just going to stay the same. 12m2. But then I have 42m and negative 10m. Since they both have m's, they can be combined. So 42 plus negative 10 is positive 32m. And then last but not least, that negative 35 is the only thing that's a regular number, so we don't have to combine it with anything. So this would be our answer. Okay, the next problem, number 7, says a rectangular vegetable garden is 2g plus 3 units wide by 8g minus 5 units long. Write a polynomial that represents the area of the garden. So it's basically the same problem that we have up here. If it's a rectangular garden, it needs to be length times width. Only this time they didn't give you a picture. They expect you to know that just from the words. So I'm going to go ahead and do double distribution this time. That way I could have an example of both. So what we're doing is we're working out the problem 2g plus 3 times 8g minus 5. So I take the first term, 2g, and I multiply it by both terms in the other polynomial. Then I would take the second term plus 3, and again, it needs to be multiplied by both terms in the second polynomial. Okay, so once I do this, 2 times 8 is 16, g to the second power. 2g times negative 5 is negative 10g. Then on the other one, 3 times 8 is 24, g. And then 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. Just like with the box method, you'll notice that there's two that are like terms. So it's the ones in the middle, negative 10g and 24g. So we are going to combine those two. But the first term and the last term don't have any like terms, so those are going to stay the same. So 16 g to the second power. But then those two that I have highlighted in green get combined, which gives us positive 14g. Then negative 15. This would be our answer. So when you're multiplying, you have your choice of whether you want to use double distribution, which is what I used in the second one, or a box method, which is the first one. Okay, number 8. Write a polynomial equivalent to the following expression by multiplying. So this time, we're multiplying, but it's 3 terms, 1, 2, 3, times 2 terms. So on this one, it's going to be a little more work, but it's the same process. Because this one is longer, though, I think it is easier to do box on this one. Only it's not going to be a box. It's going to be kind of a rectangle. Okay, so the polynomial that is 3 terms is going to go across the top. X squared plus 3x minus 5. The other binomial, since it's only 2 terms, is going to go down the side. So negative 3x minus 2. Now we are going to multiply corresponding boxes. So if I start with the top left, negative 3x times x squared. Remember there's an invisible 1 in front. So negative 3 times 1 is still negative 3. And altogether I have 3 x's. So it's going to be x to the third power. Then if I move over to the side, negative 3 times positive 3 is negative 9. Only now there's 2 x's, so x to the second power. And then last box on the top, negative 3 times negative 5 is positive 15. And there is still an x. Now at the bottom, negative 2 times x squared gives us negative 2x squared. Negative 2 times 3x gives us negative 6x. And then negative 2 times negative 5 gives us positive 10. So when you're inside the box, you're multiplying. But now that I want to take my answers outside of the box, we are going to combine like terms. So top left, that is the only thing that has to the third power. So that's going to stay the same, negative 3x to the third. But next, this box down here and this one here both have x to the second power. So those are going to get combined. Negative 2 plus negative 9 gives us negative 11. And then we just have to say that those belong to the x squareds. Then the next term that we have the same is this box here. Oops, let me use highlighter. Negative 6x and 15x. Since they both have x, we're going to combine them. So negative 6 plus 15 would give me positive 9x. And then last, that plus 10 needs to be part of our answer. So we'll have plus 10. So heads up, there is one exactly like this on the test. So you are going to need to remember how to multiply when it is 3 terms times 2 terms. Okay, now on to factoring. It says write the factors of x squared minus 14x plus 24. So when factoring, the first thing that you do is you multiply the first number times the last number, which in this case, there's an invisible 1 in the front. So you would do 1 times 24 gives us 24. So we're going to find all the ways you can multiply to 24. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. But out of all of those, it needs to add up to what's in the middle, negative 14. So this is AC, this is B. So the only one that I see that comes close is this one here, because 2 plus 12 is 14. But this needs to be negative. So the only way I could do negative is if both of them are negative here. So this one, there is a bit of a shortcut. Once you figure out which two numbers work, when you write your answer, you would just do x with the negative 2, and then x with the negative 12. And that's our answer. Okay, on to the next one. It says the area of a rectangle is 4h to the second power plus 13h minus 12. Find the dimensions of the rectangle. So like before, we already know the formula for area of a rectangle is length times width. So what they gave us here is they gave us area. They want us to find what these two things could be. So this is just a fancy way of saying they want you to factor. So like before, you get the first number times the last number. 4 times negative 12 gives me negative 48. We need to find factors of negative 48 that add up to positive 13. So 1 times 48, 2 and 24, 3 and 16, 4 and 12, 6 times 8. Okay, but because this is a negative 48, that means one of our factors needs to be negative. So now going down the list, we're looking for ones that add up to 13, and it's going to be these right here. Those add up to positive 13. Okay, so with this one, we have to do it a little different because of that number in the front. Because it has that 4 in the front, we're going to have to do some greatest common factor. So here's how we're going to set it up. 4h to the second power still stays the same, but instead of writing plus 13, this positive 13, we're going to write these two numbers because we know it equals the same thing. So minus 3h plus 16h. And then the last number is going to stay the same, negative 12. Then we are going to factor by grouping. So exactly what it sounds like, we make groups. So that first group, they both have an h. So then I'm going to divide by the h that they both have. That leaves me with 4h minus 3. Okay, and then second group. They don't both have h's, so I can't do that. But what is the biggest number that will divide 16 and 12? So this, if you can't see it, you could use that calculator trick, menu 25. But it is going to be positive 4. So let's divide by 4. And that gives me 4h minus 3. So you should notice by this point that what's inside the parentheses is the same for both of them, which is exactly what you want to happen. That's how you know you're doing it right. So that is going to be one of our factors. The other factor is anything that's outside of the parentheses. So the h plus 4. So on the test, because this is talking about dimensions, the answer choices might say something like the A rectangle has a length of 4h minus 3 and a width of h plus 4, or the other way around. But you should make sure that the two terms that they mention are the ones that you got for your factors. And in the last problem, write the factors of 25b squared minus 49. Since there's only two terms in this binomial, you should check to see if it constitutes a difference of squares. So difference means minus, so we're good on that. Then we need to check, is 25 a square and is 49 a square? So you could just type it into your calculator. I'm going to do it here on the side. The square root of 25 and see what it gives you. In this case, it is 5. Then you test out the other number, square root of 49, and that gives us 7. So yes, they're both squares and they're being subtracted. So this one is the shortcut that we learned on Thursday. Our two factors are going to be 5b minus 7, and then the same thing, only this time with a plus sign. Okay, and that's it for this review, guys. I need you to practice by doing the I do side of the review, so the column that we haven't done yet. And this paper will be due tomorrow when you take the exam. Okay, bye guys.